I just had to unplug my mic like 30 times, I guess, to get that to do that. But thank you for coming back and coming back again and doing the debate on China with me. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Um, I think we both made some pretty good points in the first episode. Just touching on a few things from the first episode. China has had universal health care since 2011.
Really?
It represented the most expansive coverage of healthcare in human history.
I wonder what took them so long to get to it, but either way, it's there now.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's why we do these, and maybe there's some other listeners out there that didn't know that. Shit, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. The last I had heard, there wasn't, which was true. Not anymore.
um, but again, that's not what makes a country socialist or capitalist either. But it's a pretty fundamental, you know, part of or fundamental feature, I guess, of most socialist systems is uh, full healthcare and in most cases full employment and things of that nature.
No, not necessarily full employment. Like you could be in a crisis and not have, still be socialist, but not have full employment.
Right. Yeah. That's what I said for the most part. It
But if
just
you're shooting for it,
right. Exactly. And
which tends to have a higher employment rate or a lower unemployment rate.
right. Um, I also wanted to talk about you made a point, and you a few times you mentioned that the government doing stuff isn't socialism, which is of course true. And you mentioned the United States uh, post World War II, and how
Actually,
there were a lot of
actually, I would like to add to that. Um, right during World War II, basically the U.S. economy was planned, like basically fully.
right, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the proletariat is prioritized in any of that, with their well-being it being at the forefront of a
No, no,
socialist system, of course.
it's war production.
Yeah, that's pretty much all it is. Um, and that's not unlike that of Nazi Germany. You made a comparison to Nazi Germany, but I mean, that's a little bit different. Uh, but at the same time, it's pretty much war production. Uh,
Not right away.
and to compare it to China is pretty horrible in the fact that
No, no, it's not. You're not gonna push some kind of Godwin's thing. They did massively restore the economy coming out of World War II. I mean, part of it out of World War One. They did. There was a massive increase. That's not praising the Nazis. That's a fact. They
right,
did do that, and that was done by you know essentially state planning. And then once they got to that level, they started privatizing, and then they showed how evil they were.
right,
I'm not comparing that to China. I'm comparing the state ownership and planning the economy.
right,
Is not
right,
is
right.
not
That's what it is.
unique to socialism. That's
Right.
all.
But most socialist countries they tend to start with a people's revolution, whether it's the, whether it's the USSR or China or Cuba or the DPRK. Um, so like I'm trying to figure out where you're at on like how can a people's revolution, right, that hasn't been overthrown and hasn't been
I answered this last time. It has been overthrown. Like there's literally a capitalist mode of production in the country. If somebody wanted to argue that this was a stage of development, that would certainly be valid. Although I would question why it's been going on so long, but I would still say that it's valid. But it's not socialist. They might still be a socialist party, They may have every intention of reverting to socialism in the future,
So because
no,
there's
but
some private, so
that's a
because there's like so because there's like a small amount of private investment, even though
no, not a
everything,
small amount, not a small amount. There's a large portion of the economy that's not only privatized, it runs on a capitalist basis. It runs on competition, and it is private property.
even though it has to be heavily regulated by the Communist
We're
Party.
going back to state regulation again.
Right, but like I don't understand
Why
like
is there
how
private property in a socialist country?
there isn't. There is no private property
There's
in
no
China.
private property in China.
There's no private property in
So
China.
you're telling me Foxconn isn't private property?
I mean,
I'm just throwing one example.
private property can be leased. I mean, but there's no instance of where like
Least private property is private property.
right, but they can't like it's all under control of the CPC in China. So I mean,
So it runs by the market. It is private property, but it's run by the CPC, meaning they can theoretically withhold that property at any time, right?
no, I'm saying the CPC can literally uh, dictate how that country conducts business or how it does business.
Oh,
Like they're
I'm sure this. I don't know that that's true, but let's just assume it is.
okay.
That sounds like something they would do. It's still running on a capitalist basis. Just because the state can go in and shut it down doesn't mean it's not. I mean, there's far smaller legal mechanisms in other countries to do the same thing. I mean, it runs on a capitalist basis with a large amount of state interference. It is capitalist. You can argue that it's an NEP style area, which I would be willing to accept because that's certainly
Well,
plausible.
I think that's where I mean where I guess this debate is going because that's I kind of mentioned it in the last debate that China is I mean China's in a certain stage of development as most socialist systems are or were in have been broken down into stages of development throughout time. The revolution and the building of socialism, and
Which
so
I'd certainly accept.
like and this is what I guess is what I mean is confusing for some people. I mean, and to go back to make a previous comparison that I did in the last episode, Lenin, Stalin, and his comrades didn't suddenly become capitalist pigs because they had some market influx. Influx. You know what I mean?
No, I never said they were.
Right. No, I
They
know.
did have a capitalism.
They had a small amount of capital,
No, there was a fair amount.
but
There's
but for
nothing wrong.
economy,
There's nothing wrong with that.
right. And what I'm saying is, though, by and large, is even though that it's not the same type of unfettered, unbridled, anarchistic market of like American capitalism. It's not that. It's not like that. You know what I mean? Like
No,
because,
because that's never existed.
oh, right. I mean, like, but and by and large, the American economy and the American market economy doesn't run the same way as the NAP or as China's economy is currently today. And that's what I think is important. You know what I mean? To recognize that no, shit isn't like America. Shit isn't run like, uh, um, the epitome of capitalism, which is the American free market
A different
capitalism.
level of state intervention.
Well, I mean, I mean that would be a loose or maybe a understatement.
No, I would say that's pretty accurate.
I mean, there's no motivation for any capitalists to get rid of poverty or get rid of unemployment or get rid of hunger. There's no motivation to do that.
But they
Um,
have done that to a large extent. Again, I go back to the example of, people's living standards have drastically increased since the 1850s,
well, yeah,
and
the
that's
1850s.
that's owed to economic development.
Right. I mean, but as we've seen in history, economic development like that in socialist countries usually happens quite a bit quicker. And even though It may seem like China's taken forever. It's a country of 1.3 billion people.
No, I'm not
So
saying it hasn't happened in China. It's happened. It's
you know,
definitely there. I'm not saying it hasn't happened. I'm saying it still runs by a capitalist mechanism, and it's still socialist. Whether or not they're going to change that later, they say they will. I'm skeptical, but I'm going to take them at their word.
and that's I think I think both you and I both uh, we both want uh, the best for the Chinese proletariat,
No, of
and
course.
we obviously we want them to go towards my direction, not your direction, if we're hoping for anything. But no, yeah, I just think that Xi Jinping is making the right steps towards doing that. Um,
I mean, we'll see. I mean, he can say
well,
whatever he wants, but we're going to have to judge him by what he does.
right. And he's been doing pretty much everything he said he was going to do since he's gotten in office so far. So I'm hopeful of that. But
I did have one more question.
yeah,
One of the main differences between the NEP in the Soviet Union and, if we're assuming an NEP in China, was that in the NEP in the Soviet Union, capitalists had no representation in the government. Yet we can see in the Chinese Communist Party, there's a lot of millionaires and billionaires, and even Xi himself is a millionaire. I'm just wondering
right.
how this factors into that.
Okay,
Like
yeah.
I can't.
Yeah, and I
I,
actually looked into that after our first debate, and billionaires literally can have no influence whatsoever on the party itself or the direction of the party. Um,
I'm
there's in
very
certain
I
cases,
very. Why are they allowed to be party members?
uh, honestly, I there's that's really, in my opinion, that's somewhat irrelevant.
Kind of. It's kind of important. Like, why is Jack Ma a member of the Communist Party? He would be the antithesis to socialism. He's literally a billionaire, accumulating
there
capital
was
for himself.
I forget his full name, but there's one billionaire in China, Wang, who he started off as a border guard for the People's Liberation Army, and now he designs public housing throughout the entire country. I mean, I don't know that
Okay.
I don't really know that it matters that he's a billionaire as far as
Well, yeah, the kind of the opposite of socialism is private property.
so you're saying socialism is where everyone makes the same? Come on, dude.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say anything like that.
Well,
I
that's what
said
you're
no. I
implying.
said
That's
private
what the
property.
whole right.
I didn't say
Well,
anything about wage differentials.
right. So there's a wage differential in China, like there is in
Okay,
other
yeah, there
countries.
is a wage
Okay,
differential. Yeah,
and so some people make a lot of money in China.
that's
So
not
does
what I
that
was
make it?
arguing.
Well, right, but you're saying that like
I
that
was
means
saying
you
about
can't
private
like it can't
property ownership. You can have
right.
wages without private property.
I get that. I get that. But if there's if
I
I
don't get why
land
you brought that up.
well because it's kind of like the opposite of like pretty much the opposite of what you're saying. It's well, you can't have people that make too much. Well,
No,
it's
I
not
didn't say that.
socialism isn't where
I didn't say that at
everyone
all.
makes. Well, that's what you implied with the whole
No, I
billionaire
said
stuff.
private property.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, you make money by having private property, but I wasn't arguing the money they're making. I was
There's
arguing
private
the
property in
existence of it. Yeah, and there is in Cuba, yeah, and
yeah.
I would consider that another mistake on their part. But that's a different
I
debate
wouldn't
for
call
another
them. I
time.
wouldn't. Yeah, no, I wouldn't call them a capitalist country either. So. But
I, yep, that's a different debate for a different time.
it is. It is. But
Sorry, I just it runs on a capitalist basis. It has private property. It has accumulation by private enterprises and individuals. That's capitalism.
yeah, that's not what's happening in China.
Yeah,
Obviously.
that is what's happening in China. There are companies competing with each other. There are multi-millionaires and billionaires. There's whole stock markets for trading financial capital, which is private ownership of businesses. That's the point of a stock market.
All right. Well, do you have anything else to add? Because
Nope, that's pretty much it.
okay. All right. Well, again, thanks for coming out, and I think it's been helpful for everybody.
No problem.
And if any listeners have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Jason, again, I appreciate it, man. We might do something else again in the future. If so, I hope you like to as well. Definitely, man.
Yep, definitely it was fun.
All right, guys, appreciate it. Thank you again. Good looking out, man. I appreciate it, dude.
Yeah, no problem. Alright, so we just go?